Today, we're going to dive into a critical question that affects every American. Can you really trust the FDA? And I'm not sure how you felt about the FDA before you watched this video, but I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. This question isn't just about public health, guys. It's about your family, your well-being, and your right to know if the very agency that's supposed to protect you might be compromised. Now let's pull back the curtain and look at why the FDA was created, who it's meant to serve, and where its money really comes from, and what that means for the American people. The FDA, or the Food and Drug Administration, was founded in 1906. That's a special year for me because it's the same year my college fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha, was funded. But I digress. The FDA's original mission was simple but crucial: to protect the public from unsafe foods, drugs, and cosmetics. Back then, it served a critical role in policing companies that were cutting corners on health and safety for profit. In theory, the FDA should be an impartial protective force, but here's where things get a little messy: the FDA's funding. In recent years, about 45% of the FDA's funding comes directly from the very industries it's supposed to regulate, mainly, guys, the pharmaceutical companies. So how did we go from a taxpayer-funded agency that solely served the public to one that partially is dependent on industry dollars? The answer lies in something called user fees. Pharmaceutical companies pay healthy sums directly to the FDA to get their products reviewed and approved. And on the surface, it sounds like a win-win. Companies pay to keep the FDA running, and we get faster drug approvals. But ask yourself, if almost half of an agency's funding comes from the industries it regulates, is it really protecting us or them? The conflicts of interest here should be setting off alarm bells. When an agency's budget depends on the businesses it's regulating, how hard do you think they'll push back? How tough are they going to be on Big Pharma when the next drug comes up for approval? Imagine you work for a company and nearly half of your paycheck comes from one client. Do you think you could really make unbiased decisions when your salary depends on keeping that client happy? This is exactly the situation at the FDA. Here's another way to think about it. The FDA is supposed to be the watchdog for public health, but it's taking treats from the very companies it's watching. How closely will a watchdog observe when it's rewarded for staying quiet? This is why full disclosure is essential. Americans deserve to know about every dollar coming into the FDA from outside sources. If there's nothing to hide, why not make all sources of funding fully transparent to the public? Let's pause for a moment, guys, to think about what this setup really means for our health and safety. Every day, millions of Americans trust that the medications they take and the food they eat have been rigorously vetted to ensure safety. But if the FDA's funding is significantly influenced by industries it's supposed to police, how much confidence should we really have? This isn't just a theoretical concern. There are real-world consequences to this conflict of interest. If you consider, for example, the opiate crisis. Opiate painkillers were approved and promoted for widespread use, even as evidence emerged that these drugs could be highly addictive and potentially deadly. The companies that made these drugs spent millions on FDA fees and lobbying efforts to get their products approved and widely marketed. This is a powerful example of how industry influence can impact public health on a massive scale with devastating consequences. And it's not just pharmaceuticals. The food industry also has a huge stake in FDA decisions. Processed food companies and agricultural giants contribute to a system that often promotes certain dietary guidelines or approves food additives without always fully understanding their long-term effects on human health. And what gets promoted instead are high-carb, low-fat diets that align with the interests of these companies. But many experts, including myself, argue that these recommendations aren't based on solid science and may actually be harmful to our health. This is where the work of the Metabolic Revolution aligns with that of investigative journalist Nina Teicholz, founder of the Nutrition Coalition. For years, Nina has been shedding light on how industry influence can shape even our basic dietary guidelines. Through her research, she's uncovered how outdated science and bias influence have led to guidelines that prioritize certain foods over others, often to the detriment of public health. Her coalition fights for transparency and science-based dietary recommendations, which align directly with what we're advocating at the Metabolic Revolution. Both our work with the Metabolic Revolution and Nina's point to the same issue, guys. When public health guidance is influenced by industry dollars, it's often the American people who suffer. Think about it. Guidelines tell us to limit things like red meat, butter, and eggs, while heavily processed grain-based foods receive a stamp of approval. Why? Because big pharma, big food, and agricultural companies have a vested interest in promoting cheap, high-margin profits. And guess who helps regulate the approval process for food additives and new products? You guessed it, the FDA. What we're calling for is simple but powerful, full transparency. If there's nothing to hide, then the public should be able to see exactly what the FDA's funding is coming from and how it impacts their decisions. We should be able to trust that our health recommendations are made for our benefit, not the benefit of a few powerful industries. This is where the Metabolic Revolution is taking a stand. Our goal is to create a healthcare system that serves the American people first, not industry interests. We believe it's possible to have an FDA that's truly independent and accountable. We're also working to educate the public about these issues because an informed public is a powerful force for change. When people understand how these systems work, they're better able to make choices that protect their health. If you're as passionate about this as we are, join us at metabolicrevolution.org. Support organizations like the Nutrition Coalition and spread the word and demand that our leaders separate industry money from public health policy. With enough voices, we can build a future where we have the transparency and accountability in our health guidance. Thank you for watching today's video, and remember, real health requires real truth. Make sure to like, hit the bell, and share your thoughts on whether you trust the FDA, and I'll see you in the next video.